All right. WWE presents Backlash tomorrow night from the WWE Performance Center in Orlando. And we are in the empty arena era for pro wrestling. But it doesn't feel like this is going to be a similar show to, say, WrestleMania. I don't know if it doesn't feel like we're going to get any real cinematic matches like the Boneyard match or the Firefly Funhouse. Everything is just a straight up match. In fact, one match is being billed as the greatest wrestling match ever. And that seems to be a good place to start for our Backlash preview here. We've got Randy Orton versus Edge in a match being billed as the greatest wrestling match ever. Now that's a strange thing to do. The match technically the match has been taped, but in storyline, the match hasn't taken place yet. So how can we determine if it's the greatest wrestling match ever? And what is WWE's motivation for labeling it the greatest wrestling match ever? Some have said that this is just a search engine optimization thing. And they want, when anybody types in to Google greatest wrestling match ever, like say you just want to watch a wrestling match and you're like, well, what wrestling match should I watch? Oh, I should watch the greatest wrestling match ever. So you would type that into Google. They want Randy Orton versus Edge to come up. And it kind of seems like both Orton and Edge have been mocking how this match has been billed. Like Edge did an interview with, I think it was SI.com or maybe ESPN, one of those two. But he basically said, I was kind of surprised by this. At first, I thought it was a joke. I mean, how do you do this? You're putting so much pressure on this match. And Edge has had one match in the last 9.5 years. And he's got this kind of pressure to have it be the greatest wrestling match ever. And that's strange because, wrestling is entertainment, so it's subjective. Some people think Steve Austin versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13 was the greatest match ever. Some think Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada at the Tokyo Dome was the greatest wrestling match ever. Some people think Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat was the greatest wrestling match ever. But Randy Orton versus Edge, they're telling you this is the greatest wrestling match ever. As if there was an objective truth to it. That we added up all the points. We scored up everything, added the tallies, and the winner of the greatest wrestling match ever is Randy Orton versus Edge. But everybody is going to go into this match thinking, so what about this match is the greatest wrestling match ever? I can't imagine a scenario where the vast majority of people who watch this match come away from it going, that was not the greatest wrestling match ever. It feels like they have to do something, right? Like there has to be some swerve, some unexpected happening, like maybe Randy Orton does something to ruin what would have been the greatest wrestling match ever. Who knows? Who knows what they're doing with this one? But whatever it is they've got planned, it'll air tomorrow night. Backlash from the WWE Performance Center. Very interesting billing WWE has given this match. But there are other matches on this show. I'm assuming the greatest wrestling match ever will be the main event, right? Because if it's the greatest wrestling match ever, how is anybody going to follow it? And that would be really surprising to me if the greatest wrestling match ever is third on the show. It's like, well, I mean, that seems like you'd want to put it on last as the big main event. I mean, how often do you get to broadcast the greatest wrestling match ever? I guess we'll have to see. There's also one of the most bizarre Universal Championship matches ever booked on the show. In a 2-on-1 handicap, Braun Strowman will be defending the championship against The Miz and John Morrison. Now, I'm assuming the rules to this are a little similar as to when Braun Strowman defended the Intercontinental Championship against Sami Zayn's Artist Collective, with Sami Zayn, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Cesaro, and somehow Sami Zayn walked away with the Intercontinental Championship. So I guess they're thinking, well, fans remember Strowman lost the last championship Strowman had. He lost in a handicap match, so let's put him in another handicap match, and some people think he's going to lose the title. And maybe he will, but it seems like Strowman just got this championship at WrestleMania. Maybe he has what it takes to thwart The Miz and John Morrison. And they did something on SmackDown recently where Miz and Morrison were sort of the guys from Pranked, it looked like, or some like hidden camera prank show, and they tried to drop green slime on Braun Strowman. This is all very WWE Vince McMahon stuff. Like, this is the stuff that you would get on Bruce Pritchard's SmackDown that you would never get on Paul Heyman's Raw. But now there is no Paul Heyman's Raw. It's all Bruce Pritchard and Vince McMahon. So this kind of stuff could start happening on Raw again real soon. But that's the Universal Championship match, Braun Strowman versus The Miz and John Morrison. We also got a WWE Championship match as Drew McIntyre will defend against Bobby Lashley. Lashley likely will have MVP in his corner. And you wonder if Lana is still going to be involved here with Bobby Lashley. I mean, everything in Raw now is up in the air. You don't know what's going to happen. You assume that Vince McMahon and the other writers are on board with Drew McIntyre, because rarely does somebody win the Royal Rumble and then beat the champion at WrestleMania without having been anointed by Vince McMahon to some degree. And of course, Vince McMahon early in Drew McIntyre's career labeled him as a future world champion. Then he fired him, then he brought him back, and now he is world champion. So he's been right and wrong about Drew McIntyre in the past. But Bobby Lashley has this sort of subplot line where MVP is now his manager, and this is infuriating Lana because they like to show Lana angry on WWE Raw. We also got a Raw Women's Championship match. Asuka will defend against Nia Jax. This is interesting. So Asuka, who just won the championship at Money in the Bank, she's now taking on Nia Jax, who just returned after a nearly year-long absence. She was gone from just after WrestleMania and then returned just after WrestleMania this year. So Nia Jax versus Asuka. And of course, Nia Jax has sort of been the subject of some criticism online regarding tree slam that she sort of missed and threw Kairi Sane onto her tailbone and onto the second turnbuckle instead of the top turnbuckle. Shortly after re-debuting, there was also an incident. She threw Kairi Sane into the steps, and Kairi got a little busted open there. So the fans that like to hate on people for what they perceive as unsafe wrestling, they're really on Nia Jax right now. But Asuka, this is going to be her first big title defense in her reign. And again, this is happening on Raw. So if you're a fan of Asuka, you hope that Vince McMahon is also a fan of Asuka, and that her ascension to the championship position on Raw wasn't a case of Paul Heyman pushing for her, but rather a case of the whole writing team being behind her. And we really don't know. We won't find out for a few weeks or even a month or two who are going to be the new favorites on Raw, if Asuka is still going to be in that category. On the same line of thinking, we've got a United States Championship match booked for Backlash between Apollo Crews and Andrade. And Apollo Crews is somebody who did a whole lot of nothing for a long time and is now getting this push to the United States Championship. Is he going to remain in that position, or is he going to fall back as to somebody just forgotten about? Andrade, I mean, he seems like kind of a no-brainer to be given a bigger role, but it always seems like he comes close to getting that bigger role, but then is sort of knocked down a peg. And this little mini stable that he's had with Zelina Vega and Angel Garza and briefly Austin Theory, they seem to lose all the time. And I think that sort of hurt them as a stable, as their win-loss record on Raw is not strong. But it's possible Andrade could get his United States Championship title back at Backlash. It's also possible that Apollo Crews retains the title and continues to move up the card. Again, we don't know. We'll see. But this should be a good match. Apollo Crews, he can do a lot of fun stuff. And Andrade, he's a good wrestler. I don't know if Andrade is capable of having the greatest wrestling match ever. I don't know that Randy Orton or Edge is, for that matter. But still, very good wrestler. We also have the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. They'll be on the line at Backlash. Bayley and Sasha Banks recently won those titles on SmackDown from Bliss Cross, Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. And they will take on Bliss Cross and the Iconics, Peyton Royce and Billie Kay at Backlash. And then the winner of that match is going to go to NXT on Wednesday and take on Shotzi Blackheart and Tegan Nox, two very up-and-coming stars of the NXT women's division. So we'll see where they go with the tag team division in the future. I mean, again, the tag team division, women's tag team division, just kind of floats around from the three brands. And it feels like we don't have a lot of established tag teams, established women's tag teams. The Iconics are an established tag team. Bayley and Sasha Banks are an established tag team. And now Bliss Cross is an established tag team as well. What other ones are there? It seemed like we'd been getting Aaliyah and Vanessa Bourne on NXT. We might still get that. Maybe they'll be part of the Robert Stone brand or something like that. But Paige was on WWE Backstage this week, and she sort of echoed this sentiment as well. We're not really building new teams. Occasionally, two women will be put together. But in terms of building a tag team division, there's not a lot of set teams. But the three set teams that they do have, they're going to be in this match here. And then finally, one other match that'll take place at Backlash, Jeff Hardy versus Sheamus. And the storyline here is, they're really making a point to bring out Jeff Hardy's history with DUIs and drug and alcohol abuse. And the storyline is, well, it's believed that Sheamus ran over Jeff Hardy and Elias and took them out of the Intercontinental Championship tournament. Sheamus denies it. But a witness said they saw somebody with red hair and a red beard driving the car that hit Jeff Hardy and Elias. So is there somebody else with red hair and a red beard who might be upset about the Intercontinental tournament? Was it Sheamus and he's just lying? I don't know. We'll find out. And then on SmackDown last night, Jeff Hardy was being forced to take a drug test and ended up throwing a thing of urine into Sheamus's face. I think they've done that sort of angle a couple of times. I remember they did it with Marty Jannetty once. I think they did it with some others as well. But that's Backlash. So we got 7 matches on the show. I don't think any of them are really going to be a quote-unquote cinematic match. Looks like this is just a straight wrestling card. We'll see if it goes the same length that their pay-per-views have been doing recently, under 3 hours. I think a lot of people are responding positively to that. Like, yeah, 2.5, 3 hours, that's a good pay-per-view time. If you want to take your bigger shows longer than that, okay. But let's keep the majority of them to something that you can just sit down and watch without ever going, oh my God, when is this over?